Thank you so, yes. We are, door just broke. What door just broke? Oh, the bay door? Hold on. I need some help. Oh, no, they got it. So now what? So the bay door just broke, and Steve Marchand is looking like Hercules up there. Is this live stream coming through clear, y'all? Somebody shout it out in the chat. Yes. Look, y'all, there's a wide variety of people here for sure. Young people to old people. Boomers and under. We got 326 on here, y'all. See if we can get some more on here. Y'all see little Yang Gang back through there? I saw him through the door. Okay, good. Thank you for shouting that out. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate that. You rock. I want to try to get your name right. I don't know if I can. I can't. It's not letting me scroll down my thing, y'all. I'm trying to find the name, but it's not letting me scroll. I don't know if it's because my fingers are cold or what. There we go. Shang, thank you so much. That is a cool-ass robot, too. I think transforms. It's really cool.
All right.
Here we go.
How y'all doing tonight? How many of you would call yourself Yang Gang?
Yeah!
How many of you would call yourself Yang Curious? I know this. I know all of you in about half an hour are going to be full Yang Gang. I'm Steve Marchand. I used to be the mayor of this city. We love Portsmouth. And we love Loaded Question. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Loaded Question. How many of you have had a beer tonight already? Okay, that sounds good.
Somebody buy me a beer.
We're going to have another beer after this event is officially over.
Yeah!
After this is done, Andrew is going to head back, do some selfies. So if you want the selfies, you got something to sign, head on back, get another beer. Our proprietors, Tom and Ben, who are awesome, are great hosts. We would appreciate it if you would frequent their product tonight. You will enjoy it if you haven't had it already. Real quick, he's going to be here in a couple minutes. I met Andrew in January. We had a cup of coffee.
So he's coming back.
It was love at first sight. Wait a second. 44-year-old first-generation American, father of two who likes math? Holy crap, that was me! Except this guy wanted to change America for the better. It turns out he recognized that change in Washington doesn't come from leadership in Washington. Washington is not a city of leaders. It is a city of followers. And they follow the lead of people that would show up on a 45-degree night in the middle of the week in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, saying that they want change. Y'all want change? Yeah! How many of you have seen Andrew in person before? Woo! All right, there's the Yang Curious factor going on.
There's a lot of people who haven't even seen Yang before here, y'all.
When I met him in January, we stayed in touch, and then in late March, I traveled with him for a few days to northern New Hampshire. We had a great time, and at the end of that time, he said, I need you to be a part of the team. He was in about 16th place at the time. He's not in 16th place anymore, is he?
That's right.
He's not in 12th place or 8th place. He's in 4th place in California, folks.
Nice.
As the Jefferson said, he is moving on up. And we believe here in New Hampshire that this is one of, if not the best opportunity, to shock the world on February 11th, 2020. Are you ready to shock the world on February 11th, 2020?
No one can stand in there, except for the organizers.
I went down in May and I got to introduce him in New York City. That was awesome. That was a hell of an experience. Watching the crowd, thousands of people excited for Andrew. That snowball's been growing a lot more since then. There was a guy there who I talked to before the event, and he had a sign that suggested that he had been a Trump voter in 2016. That's all right. You know what? I don't care who you voted for in 2016. You know what I care about? I care who the hell you vote for in 2020. That's what I care about. That's what I'm talking about. The Yang Gang is about love. I don't care if you voted for Bernie or Hillary or Trump or some other Republican or Jill Stein or Gary Johnson or George Washington. I don't care. I don't care if you didn't vote last time. Perhaps because you thought it didn't matter anymore. Maybe you thought you were choosing between the lesser of two evils. People don't want that anymore. They want to vote for something they can believe in. They want to believe in a country that represents the best of what we can be, not the worst of what we have been. Somebody that represents a young and aspirational and diverse face, the future of America. Somebody who is focused on solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. The guy in that audience, what Trump said, he voted for Trump because there were problems and he was looking for desperate solutions, desperate for anything different. And so he gave Donald Trump a chance.
Yeah.
Donald Trump was the wrong answer to the right question. Andrew Yang, folks, is the right answer to the right question. How are we going to make this country stronger in an age of automation? How are we going to make this a place where we lift all people up and do it at $1,000 a month? Freedom, baby. Freedom dividend, baby. Yeah. Medicare for all, baby. That's the future of America. I think the future of America is right behind me. And we even have a door that hopefully will open. And that it will not cause my ass to fall on the ground all day.
That's Zach over there.
Enough said. Ladies and gentlemen, the next president of the United States of America, he's right here.
Let's go, Andrew! Woo! Yeah, he was.
Why are you so far away?
Y'all look at this crowd of people. Y'all look at this crowd of people. Let's go, Yang Gang!
I'm gonna come down after I'm done talking, then we're gonna selfie it up and have a blast. Hello again, Portsmouth! I want to thank Tom and the Loaded Question for hosting us tonight. Whole team. And of course, Steve Marchand, the former mayor of this great town, for introducing me and for being a senior member of the Yang Gang. It is a blast to be back here in New Hampshire. How many of you know I went to high school here in the state? Yes. Yeah, I went to Phillips Exeter Academy, don't hold it against me. But though I came up, I was like, does Exeter count? And they're like, oh, it counts. And I was like, oh, great. It's a blast to be back. I believe this is my 22nd trip to New Hampshire during this cycle. You're fit just to see me? Excellent, man. Yes. So let me actually get a run of that. How many of you have seen me speak before in some other context? Most of you have not. That's fantastic. Yes. You are what I call Yang curious. Well, I'm thrilled for you all to be here because you all hold the future of the country in your hands. I did the math. Do you know how many Californians each New Hampshire voter is worth? 1,000 Californians apiece. That's right. You look at this parking lot here. I count about 120 of us. So I don't just see a parking lot full of 120 New Hampshire voters. I see 120,000 Californians. That's like 3 football stadiums of Californians. That's the power in this parking lot. That's why people like me come and ask you to support our vision for the country. Hold your hand up and tell us, how many presidential candidates have you seen this cycle so far? So this would be 4, be 5, 7, 8. A lot of ones, wow. Well, he's got, looks like 10, 4, 6. Bernie came through. Me and Bernie. I supported Bernie in the last cycle, to give you guys a sense of where I was at. And one of the thrilling things for president is you actually hang out with each other at these events and backstage. So when Bernie said he liked me, I was like, oh my gosh, Bernie Sanders likes me. Because he can be around that guy a fair amount being like, does he like me? That's great. Sir, we have to bring your daughter everywhere we go. We'll give her back to you around 2021. So I've been here 22 times because of the power you all have, where you can set the country in a new direction very, very quickly. Such a thrill. You're a little bit spoiled by it. A little bit. You're like, I don't know about that Yang guy. I just met him the one time. But when people ask me about what I think about our process, I tell them, I was like, if you tried to move the first primary to another state, no one would have any clue what to do. You know what I mean? Like, you all have this incredibly highly developed political culture where candidates like me don't get just compared to other candidates in the cycle. We get compared to candidates from 8 or 12 or 20 years ago. I was in a living room here in New Hampshire and they said Barack Obama and Jimmy Carter stood where you're standing now. And I was like, wow. You know, so they compare you across generations. If you tried to have another state take on the power that you all have, it would be a disaster, honestly. Like, no one would know what the heck was going on. So you have this power, and the question is, how are you going to use it in this coming election? Now, I went to high school here in the state. I graduated in '92, so you get a sense of what generation I am. Exeter had me back to speak a few months ago, and I was honest when I went back. I said, I haven't been back since I graduated because I didn't have a good time here. And then the student body erupted in applause, and I was like, oh no, I felt bad. Like, it wasn't my intended reaction. So after I graduated from Exeter, I went to Brown University. Wow, that's great. Yeah, our football team's terrible. It was really bad. So I went to Brown. I didn't know what to do, so I went to law school, and then I spent 5 unhappy months as a corporate lawyer, and that job was for the birds. The job was essentially trying to figure out the worst things that could happen, and then like writing contracts to be like, oh, what if this terrible thing happens? Oh, let me write that down. So I was like, wow, it's like I felt like I was just professionally like a really negative human. And so I thought, well, like, I want to be someone who actually makes something good happen. So I left the firm after 5 months to start a business, start a little company. How many of you have started a business or a mailing list or nonprofit or book club or really anything under the sun? Yeah. And this is a very entrepreneurial town. It's a very entrepreneurial setting. I love small businesses like Loaded Question. So I started this business. If you had your hands up or you shouted and you started something, you know 2 things. Number 1, it's much, much harder than anyone ever lets on. And number 2, when someone asks you how it's going, what do you say? It's great. There's really only one answer to that question. So my company went great until it failed. My parents were telling people I was still a lawyer because it's a little easier. But I'd been bitten by the bug, and I said, okay, let me try and see if I can get better at building. And so I worked as the sidekick to a more experienced entrepreneur for a number of years, and then I became the head of a small education company that grew to become #1 in the United States and was bought by a big company in 2009. 2009 was a really rough time in most of the country. How many of you were here in New Hampshire in 2009? And how was that time here in this part of the state? Not good, right? Oh, hello to you too. Well, so it seems like a lot of you are here in New Hampshire. How many of you are from another part of the Northeast, like me? I grew up in upstate New York. How about the Midwest? Yes. Someone said Florida? Florida, yeah. South, including Florida. Yeah. West Coast. Yeah. So for me, that time, the financial crisis was in full bloom, and I thought I had some clue as to why the economy had crashed. It was that so many of the whiz kids I'd gone to Exeter and Brown and Columbia with had gone to Wall Street to come up with these exotic financial instruments and derivatives and mortgage-backed securities, and they crashed the economy. And so I thought, wow, what a train wreck that is. And even though I had nothing to do with it, I felt like I knew some of the people. And so I thought, well, if this is such a disaster for the country, how about we try and create a more positive path for people? And standing here and talking about how much I love entrepreneurs, what I thought the country could use more of was people starting businesses and creating jobs in places like Providence, Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, Birmingham, and other cities around the country. So I quit my job. I was so struck by the financial crisis. I was like, wow, this is so bad that this is the pursuit that we put people on, and it's crashed the economy. That I quit my job. I started a nonprofit called Venture for America, and then I started calling rich friends with this question: do you love America? And then the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes to this question? And then I said, at least $10,000. And then 12 of them said, I love America for 10,000. It's like, I thought you did. So we started with a couple 100,000, it grew and grew into the millions, helped create several thousand jobs around the country in Detroit, St. Louis, Cleveland, Birmingham. So I was seeing parts of the country I'd never seen before. The organization was so successful that I was awarded Champion of Change and Ambassador of Entrepreneurship by the Obama administration. So I got to introduce my wife to the president. My in-laws were very excited about me for about a week. They were like look at the pictures. She did all right. But while I was getting clapped on the back for my work with Venture for America, I had this sinking feeling that I was pouring water into a bathtub that had a giant hole ripped in the bottom. And for those of you who are from other parts of the country, when you fly between St. Louis and San Francisco or Michigan and Manhattan, you feel like you're crossing dimensions or decades or ways of life and not just a few time zones. So I had this sinking feeling. I was like, oh, like I don't think my work's actually stemming the tide. And then Donald Trump became our president in 2016. Now, how did you all react when that happened?
Yes.
Tears, booing, shock, disbelief. I saw it too, and I said, oh my gosh, we're at a point where tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as our president. No, and that's like a full stop moment. That's like a wow, like whatever we're doing is really not working. And so I started digging into the numbers. Now, if you turn on cable news, why would you think that Donald Trump won in 2016? Russia, immigrants, emails, not enough young people voting, DNC, racism, Facebook, the FBI. Like, there's a sort of cocktail of reasons that have been presented to us, right? That's like a pretty good list. But when I dug into the numbers, I found a very, very clear explanation for his victory that I found singularly compelling, and it was this. The reason why Donald Trump is our president today is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs that were primarily in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Wisconsin, all the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. And if you go to the district data, you see a straight line up between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting area and the movement to Trump. To me, this is the main reason he won. And unfortunately, we are not stopping with the manufacturing jobs. This is a very prosperous town, but how many of you have noticed stores and malls closing here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing? Amazon, one word answer. Amazon's soaking up $20 billion in business every single year. Then how much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. That is the math, New Hampshire. 20 billion out, zero back. And being a retail clerk is the most common job in most of the country. The average retail clerk's a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $10 an hour. So when her store or mall closes, what is her next job going to be? Oh, it's rhetorical, it's unclear. How many of you have seen a self-serve kiosk in a McDonald's or fast food restaurant? They're going to be in every location of McDonald's in the next 2 years in the United States. And they're going to start shifting from the front of the house to the back of the house because a lot of the production tasks in the back can also be automated. So they're working on robot burger flippers and the rest of it in the back. When you all call a customer service line of a big company and you get the software, you probably do the exact same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, 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 and try to get someone on the line, right? Raise your hand if that's what you do. Yeah, we all do it, because that software is miserable. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software is going to sound like this. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It's going to be fast, seamless, delightful, a little bit seductive, perhaps. What is that going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work in call centers right now making $14 an hour? The biggest disaster, how many of you all know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? Driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states, 3.5 million truckers, and my friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. They tell me they're 98% of the way there. Now that sounds impressive. 2% is actually a very high error rate for semi-trucks because you can't have them smashing into things. But the cost savings behind automating truck driving are estimated to be $168 billion a year in savings. Not just from labor, but equipment utilization and fuel and accidents. $168 billion a year is a lot of resources to try and get that last 2%. And the way they think they can get the last 2%, you all remember the first time you watched TV on your cell phone, you remember that? So that was 3G. We are now rolling out 5G. And the way they think they can get the last 2% is by equipping these semi-trucks with teleoperating software. So the robot trucks are really bad with snow. Oh, think about this for a second. Because they're like looking at the road markings, and then when the road markings get covered with snow, they're like, I'm in a white field. I have no idea what to do. So the way they can surmount the snow obstacle is by having a teleoperator sitting in Nevada or Arizona beam into the truck when the computer's not sure what to do, look out the front through various cameras, and drive it like a video game, like they're in the truck. Yeah, 5G, just beam in, and then the computer's like, okay, I got it again, then you beam back out. What do you think the ratio will be between teleoperators and truck drivers? 1 to 10, 1 to 2,000, 1 to 1,000. What is that going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers in this country, or the 7 million Americans who work in truck stops, motels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal or going to sleep? This is going to blast regional economies all throughout the center of the country in particular.
I got them.
Truckers, the 3.5 million truckers, 94% men, average age 49, average education, high school or 1 year of college. I was at a truck stop and talking to the various truckers about what's coming down the pike, and my conversations with them have changed a lot over the last number of months. A year and a half ago, I said, hey, what do you think about robot trucks? They were like, impossible, never going to happen. You talk to them today and be like, hey, what do you think about robot trucks? They're like, they got to make those illegal. That's a very different response, right? That actually acknowledges the reality, because they have YouTube. You know, they can just go on and they see it. UPS just invested in self-driving trucks, and they're on the highways already in Arizona. Donald Trump is not the cause of all of our problems, and I sense that most of you know this. He's a symptom. He's a manifestation of the fact that our economy is pushing more and more Americans to the side, leaving more and more Americans feeling like they're left behind, that there's not a place for them in the 21st century economy. The manufacturing job loss I'm talking about happened here in New Hampshire, but it happened years earlier. Like, you all lost jobs in the north of the state in printing presses and some other businesses, and a lot of those communities have not recovered. It's one reason why many of your friends and neighbors celebrated Trump's victory, even while some of you were shocked by it. I mean, New Hampshire, Trump did not win this state, but it was not that huge a gulf. It was it was right there. So these are the things I was processing and figuring out in 2017 after Trump won. I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? It's like, oh my God, automation. And I have friends in Silicon Valley who are working in the labs on artificial intelligence, the rest of it. The more you know, the more concerned you are. I have yet to meet someone who's a deep expert who's like, yeah, it'll be all right. I mean, the deep experts are like, it is gonna get so nasty and hairy. So I'm here in large part to try and connect the different pieces, because most of us experience the economy just in our one geography, but I have been all over the country for 7 years. New York, Silicon Valley, 18 cities, parts in between. And I knew that we were scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants had next to nothing to do with. And so I said, okay, how do we respond to these economic changes? And my first move was not to run for president of the United States, believe it or not, because I'm not insane. I'm actually a pretty reasonable person. So the first thing I did is I went to Washington, D.C. I was an Obama appointee. I'm a pretty cool guy. So I could sit with various people and say, what are we going to do about the fact that we're going through the greatest economic transformation in our country's history and no one seems to understand it? We're scapegoating immigrants. And what do you think the folks in Washington, D.C. said to me when I asked, what are we going to do to help our country get through this time?
Don't talk about it.
I don't know. I'll get back to you. So the 3 big responses I got in New Hampshire. Number 1, we cannot talk about this. Number 2, we should study this further. And number 3, we must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Yeah. And I said, that sounds very excellent and responsible. But I looked at the studies on how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers in the Midwest who lost their jobs. Do you all want to know how, or guess how effective those programs were on a percentage basis? 10, 13. I'm anchoring you low, obviously, and it is low. It's 0 to 15%. They're a total dud. And when I said that to the folks in DC, you know what they said to me next? I guess we'll get better at it. That's what passes for policy out of DC. And there was one person in DC who said something that sent me here to you all tonight. He said, Andrew, no one in DC is going to do anything about the set of problems because fundamentally this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. And the only way we will do anything about it is if you create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted, I'll be back with a wave. And that was 2 years ago, New Hampshire, that was 2 years ago. And now I stand before you, either 4th, 5th, or 6th in national polls to be President of the United States. We raised $10 million last quarter in increments of only $30 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. And when Democrats here in New Hampshire, what is the #1 criteria you have for the nominee?
Beat Trump.
Beat Donald Trump. There was a poll out of New Hampshire that showed that I was one of only 2 candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they would support in the general. And it had me beating Donald Trump more than just about any other candidate in the field. Democrats have not figured out yet that I am the surest bet to beat Donald Trump in the general election in 2020. But they're figuring it out. It's great. And seeing the eyes open and be like, oh, that makes sense. In part because my candidate is already peeling off thousands of disaffected Trump voters, including I sense some people are here with us tonight.
Yes, we are, brother. Yes, we are. We're here.
Round of applause. As well as libertarians, independents, and Democrats and progressives. We can build a much broader coalition to take on and defeat Donald Trump in 2020. So I open this up asking, how are you going to use your power? What is the plan? How are we going to respond to the fact that we're going through the greatest economic transformation in our country's history, and our politicians do not want to touch it with a 10-foot pole? They really don't. So if you heard anything about me, you heard this. There's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. Remember that?
I heard that.
Yeah, and I remember, I know the first time you heard it, you were like, ha, that's a gimmick. That will never happen. But this is not my idea, and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine, founding father, was for this at the beginning of the country. Called it the citizens' dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King fought for and championed this in the 1960s, called it the guaranteed minimum income for all Americans, and it is what he was fighting for the day he was assassinated in 1968. 1,000 economists, including Milton Friedman, endorsed it, and it was so mainstream, it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon. It was called the Family Assistance Plan, would have guaranteed a minimum income for every American family. And 11 years later, one state actually passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that?
Alaska.
And how do they pay for it?
Oil.
And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Technology.
Technology, data, artificial intelligence, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. Raise your hand if you saw that study. Raise your hand if you have access to a Netflix password. So there's a documentary on Netflix called The Great Hack that has that study among others in it. But our data is now worth more than oil. It's worth tens of billions of dollars more. How many of you got a data check in the mail? None of us got a data check in the mail. Where did the data check go? Facebook, Amazon, Google, the trillion-dollar tech companies that pay zero or next to zero in taxes. These are the rules of the 21st century economy that we must change to work for us, to work for you. Because right now, your data is getting spirited away, getting sold and resold over and over again, and we get none of it. I use the tech companies the same way you all do, which is you see that I agree, I consent form, and you just scroll to the bottom of it and hit consent, right? I mean, no one, I have a law degree, I just don't read that stuff, you know? It's like, I agree. We it's just like human. I think we all do the same stuff. In a way, our society is now filled with false choices. It's like, you can choose to consent or not consent, but you really have no choice but to consent. If you want to be a participating member of society, like, you should attempt to hit that thing. We are outgunned. One of the goals of the government has to be to balance the scales. I'm a parent. How many of y'all are parents? Oh, congratulations to the parents. I say, next to having a kid, starting a business is the hardest thing. It's like starting a business and having kids, like above that. So if you're a parent, you probably, like me, see your kid zoning out with various screens and you feel this pang. You're like, oh man, am I screwing up my kid somehow? And I talk to the folks in Silicon Valley who designed those apps and videos and rabbit holes to be essentially as addictive as possible. And my friend Tristan Harris put it best. He said, we have some of the smartest minds in our country today turning supercomputers into dopamine delivery device teenagers. No. And then you say to the parent, be like, oh, you can choose to do something about that. It's like, you know, that's like another false choice we have. like all of these things where we're completely outgunned. So I'm going to ask you all, whose fault is it that Amazon is paying zero in taxes? Is it their fault?
It's our fault.
No, it's our fault. We must be pretty dumb if we have a system where $1 trillion tech company is paying zero in taxes, less than everyone here tonight. So this is what you all must change. This is what I'm talking about when I say rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to work for us. I believe that our data should be ours. And that if anyone's going to make money off it, it should be us too.
Yes.
This is what true freedom looks like. Our freedom's actually getting eroded and taken away from us bit by bit. With the internet companies, you trade your data for all these fantastic services, and you're like, it's free. It must be free, you know? Free is free. Free is not free, it turns out. You know, like it started out as free, and then they've monetized us all. They've turned us all into rats in a maze. And then they've patted us on the head, saying, it's okay, we've got it. And it's up to you all to be like, no, you don't got it, we've got it. The American people have got it. I mean, and when I talked to the tech companies about this, they had the most ridiculous thing. They were like, hey, it's too hard for us to share the data money with everybody. And I was like, are you kidding me? If it was the other way around and we owed you money, there'd be like zero complexity. It'd be like, give us your credit card. You know? That's what they would say. But then they were like, oh, to pay the people, it's like, oh, too tricky. It's like, for half of us, they actually have our info already. That's true. The other way we interact with them is like, you get those notifications, you're like, Yahoo got hacked, or a message saying, oh, you should probably change your password. And then you're like, did you guys lose my data? Like, that's really what you think, because that is probably what happened. And then, I actually want to ask you this, the first time I've asked any group this, what percentage of the time do you actually change your password when they tell you to? All the time, not that much. All the time, most of the time. Raise your hand if it's 80% or more. All right, raise your hand if it's like 30% or less. I don't mean. I'm probably between the two of you, honestly. I should admit that, because I'm like the tech presidential candidate, so it'd be like, he definitely changes his password 100% of the time. Now I'm a human being, I'm like, this account doesn't matter. You know, they don't have any good data in this one. You know, I bought some comforters, who cares? Anyway. So right now we're in the midst of this economic transformation, and our government is decades behind the curve. We are seeing none of the gains. This freedom dividend that I'm standing for is an old American idea whose time has come, which is now overdue. Because we're at a point where when artificial intelligence leaves the lab, it's going to do a number on many, many Americans. It has nothing to do with how smart, hardworking you were. It has nothing to do with your character. When the robot trucks hit the highway, it does not matter if that truck driver was hardworking and conscientious or not. The robot truck will never stop. So this is how we make ourselves owners and shareholders of the 21st century economy. This freedom dividend of $1,000 a month, lay a foundation for all of us, particularly because after I'm president, thanks to you all,
Yeah.
and you get the dividend in 2021, where will the money actually be spent in real life?
Groceries. Bills.
How much of it would stay right here in New Hampshire? Most all of it, 80%. Some of it would float up to the cloud. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it will go to car repairs you've been putting off, and school loans, and daycare expenses for the parents here, Little League signups, and the loaded question, am I right? You might come out, have another beer. This is how we build a trickle-up economy, from our people, our families, and communities up. This would actually work for you, for us, unlike the trickle-down garbage that's been weakening our communities for decades. So the trickle-up economy ends up pushing us in the right direction very, very quickly, in part because it recognized the kind of work that my wife does at home every day with our two boys, one of whom is autistic. And challenging work that's being done today. I was off the trail for a couple days taking care of our kids, and you know what I said after a couple days? I said, get me back to doing something easier, like running for president. Not saying, I mean, I love my kids, and I love spending time with them, but it's just really, really hard work. Really hard work. So we have these economic statistics, these measures that are leading us off a cliff. Self-driving cars and trucks will be great for GDP and productivity stats, but they'll be very, very bad for us, the citizens of this country. So if corporate profits aren't doing it, what would actually tell us how you all are doing and how we can improve our own lives? Like, what's a measure that if it got better, you would actually be legitimately excited?
Lifespan.
Health and life expectancy. Thus, deaths of despair, mental health and freedom from substance abuse. Clean air and clean water. Childhood success rates and education rates. How about student loan levels and affordability? Number of artists. These are the real measures of our progress. Entrepreneurship, rates of business formation. These are the real measures of our own health and progress. Right now, our country is beating us over the head with three big numbers. What are they? GDP, headline unemployment, stock market prices, right? So I'm just going to quickly trash each of them because they're pretty much garbage. GDP, even the inventor said 100 years ago, this is a terrible measurement of national well-being. We should not use it as that. And here we are 100 years later being like, oh, the number. Headline unemployment does not include people dropping out of the workforce. It doesn't include the fact that 40 to 44% of recent college graduates are underemployed in a job that does not require a degree. Does not include the fact that 94% of new jobs are temp gig or contract jobs that often don't have benefits. It doesn't talk about whether you need to do two jobs in order to just make ends meet. None of these things figure in the headline unemployment rate. Even Donald Trump, when he was the candidate, do you remember this? What did he say? He was like, oh, the headline unemployment number is fake news. Remember that? Remember that? And then he became president. All of a sudden, it's real news. He was actually right the first time when he was running. That number is garbage. And then the third one, stock market prices. The bottom 80% of Americans own 8% of stock market wealth. The bottom 50% own 0. Why would you have a measurement that corresponds to the top 20% of your population and treat it like it's 100%? It makes no sense. So we need to have the real measurements of how we are doing. And if you look at the real measurements, we are falling apart. How many of you knew that our life expectancy as a country has declined for the last 3 years in a row? And why is that?
Suicide.
Drug overdoses and suicides have each overtaken vehicle deaths for the first time in American history. The last time America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row was the Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions. You have to go that far to find a time in American history where our life expectancy declined 3 years successively, because it is actually highly unusual for life expectancy to decline ever in a developed country. That is not normal. Ordinarily, life expectancy will just keep creeping up if you're a rich, advanced, developed country like ours. Going down 1 year is highly unusual. Going down 3 years in a row is a catastrophe. And then when you dig into why it's happening, it's because suicides and drug overdoses have become the norm. And I know that New Hampshire has suffered more than just about any other state in terms of the opiate epidemic. The opiate epidemic is a disease of capitalism run amok. The fact that we allowed this to happen to our people, to me, is criminal. The company that profited from OxyContin got fined $600 million, which sounds like a lot, until you realize they made $30 billion. They got a 2% fine for distributing a drug that killed tens of thousands of our fellow Americans and is continuing to wreak havoc on lives and families and neighborhoods every single day. These are the real measurements of how we're doing. These are the real reasons why Donald Trump is our president. And as your president, I will toss out the old numbers. Well, I'll keep some of them around. They're kind of useful just as like a reference. But I will update GDP to include our health and life expectancy, our mental health and freedom from substance abuse, our childhood success rate, how clean our air and water are, and I will present these numbers, the real numbers, to you and every other American at the State of the Union every year in a PowerPoint deck. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck in the State of the Union. And if you like the visual of a president using PowerPoint at the State of the Union, then you should probably join the Yang Gang, because I think that. So this is the vision that you all can make real. This is the power you have. Is why I love campaigning here. Just about every other American looks up, and what do they see? They see our government pipes just clogged with lobbyist cash and money, and they say there's nothing my vote can do to flush the pipes. They are generally correct, New Hampshire. Americans are smart. You go to them and say, oh, you can vote, you can make a difference. They're like, my vote's not gonna flush those pipes. They're right, but your votes will. Your votes can actually transform the future of the country like this. Come February of next year, if you say we want to rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to work for us, the people, the owners and shareholders of this country, then it will become fact. That's why I love it here, because with you all leading the way, we can create a new way forward for the entire country. Donald Trump is our president today in part because he got some of the problems right. If you remember, he said he was going to make America great again, and what was Hillary Clinton's response? America's already great, remember that? And that did not quite work. We have to acknowledge the depth and severity of the problems, but we need solutions that will actually move us forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? He said we're going to build a wall, we're going to turn the clock back, we're going to bring the old jobs back. New Hampshire, we have to do the opposite of all of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society as quickly as possible, and we have to evolve and progress in the way we think about ourselves and our value. And I am the ideal candidate for that job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much.
Let's go, Andrew!
Let's make history. Let's make America think harder. And win the whole thing in 2020. I love it here. I'm going to run down and say, hey, we can take some questions. It's cold out there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Yang. Here's what we're going to do. Line up. You guys seem to get the, your intuition is strong. Line up over here. We're going to do selfies where you see the math and Yang Gang signs. And then after you get the selfie,